before I open.
Thank you very much. And I do have a few things prepared for the board. Hopefully everybody got the packets that I've been sending out regarding the current budget. There has been minor changes. And I wanted to be able to present or trying to, especially in these times, make it so that it is something that is feasible for people who are going through COVID-19, having hardships, are still going to be able to afford. The intent is to try to come to a flat rate or a 0 mill increase. So we've spoken, Tom, Christy, and I have spoken about it, trying to figure out how we can work on it together. I've spoken with Ken. We think we came up with a plan that would work. I didn't want you to be able to see the presentation about this. And if we have questions afterwards, I'd definitely be able to answer them. Any other staff that we have online right now with Collins and Vincent, so they can answer questions. But why don't we start out with, you do all have your packets with you, and we'll go from there. I have a presentation that I'd like to be able to make sure I got it available for you. Let's see if I can do the share. All right, so what I did was I put together a slideshow. If you can all see that?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, very good. What you have not been able to do based on the fact of our current situation is you have not been able to sit with each of the departments. And department by department is important so you can understand what the changes were, pros and cons. So what I did was with Kelly, we sat down with each department and we went and took our notes as they presented their budget to us. I'll share that with you in this format and talk to you, and as we go through, it'll show you the actual budget for that department, and any related documentation is for changes should be listed underneath there. If after this you would like a copy of this, I can definitely share that with you, but let's start going through it if you don't mind. This is the Board of Selectmen section of the budget. It talks about the changes. You'll notice that the first selectman, other selectmen, and salaries at this point have 0 beside it. We usually go do the same process with you as Board of Finance to say it's our intention to have your input on those as well. So that's what is going on. You'll notice on the bottom it says request for increase is in alignment with the current budget numbers as demonstrated by the outstanding needs. The largest area of increases for the legal notices and advertising. As I came into office, I noticed that that was one of the items that had already been pretty much allocated, and we talked about a July item transfer to help that out. So we've been putting a lot of things to bid through QVG grant applications, and because of that, it really shouldn't be there, but it was expended through that process. But we also notice there's a lot of legal notices that go on, so I did increase that by a small amount. You'll notice that there. The supplies are also lowered from the previous budget, and not enough was allocated from the previous budget. That's why there's a slight increase there. Tech services is really when we have our minutes transcribed by the recording secretary. So what I did was I moved that, you'll see that later on, it's moved down into where all the rest of the boards and commissions are. And that's why that's listed as such. So you'll note that the administrative assistant salary is also contingency upon the town hall union contract. We'll move off into the finance department. Same issues are here where the finance department head and also assistant finance director and bookkeeper have 0 for percentage at this point, only because there's contract negotiations still going on for the supervisors, and so we're having contingency items there. Again, anything with a contract, we're holding off. Contingency does go into that contingency line item specifically for waiting for a contract to complete. There's a Markham. Let's talk about Markham for a second. It's not. We've noticed that particular company has asked and requested for extra things. That's why it's taking so long for this whole process to go through. So we're probably going to have to go with Markham again next year. And in process with them, though, I still think that 6 months is reasonable for an increase on the things that they're requesting and still be staying within that part of the budget. You'll notice that the rest of it, there's no other increases really. So we're trying to, again, maintain and hold on to the numbers as close as possible. The assessor, same thing, the department head and salaries, there's no increase there because there's contracts still being negotiated. The minor increases that you'll see are listed as below. We're moving the mapping machine costs out of there because it really didn't belong there to begin with, but that's where we're doing there for a decrease. A small decrease in the conference, in training and dues, and a little bit of an increase in supplies and expenses. My opinion was they were under budgeted from the previous year. That's why they need to come back up more of an alignment where they are. And again, town hall and town hall supervisors unions will be in the contingency line item. Tax collector. Again, all of these departments have been very, very good by trying to hold the line of what you have. Supplies and expenses went down a little bit. They were able to hold the line with what they had. So that's what, when the tax collector came to us, that's what she said. This is minus 2%. Again, their department head is also on your discussion and vote what the tax collector department head would get in salaries as a union contract. Town clerk. You'll notice that we've had one clerk rolling over to the other, and during their discussions, they were talking about the recommendation for reduction for one line item there. You'll notice the general indexes. So they thought that it would be appropriate, and this was again with the advice of the previous town clerk and current town clerk to drop that down for $2,000. And again, the math machine didn't belong in there, so we took that out. So you'll see that there's a decrease there for 1% or $21.60. Here's where there is a change, and I wanted to show you this. This is elections and registrars. Registrars are another portion of where the Board of Finance would have to approve an increase in salaries. And you'll notice the election workers went up, and I described why down below. You have the August primary, a November election, a May budget referendum, and you have to put a contingency in case the May budget referendum doesn't pass, or you may have to go back a second time, or a town meeting, so there's costs associated. The other cost that's associated with the supplies and expenses is related to the machines. When you have those four referendums, you have to have special, now with the new machines, have them set up for each one. So there's an extended cost to that as well. And also the election workers, a small increase because the city is at change with the hourly rates. So there's an adjustment there for that as well. Buildings and grounds. Let me explain this one. We had 3 full-time staff and we had 2 part-time. At this time, we're going to be going with 3 full-time and 1 part-time. We believe we can handle that as we have been so far. So that's why the reduction is there. So it's minus 5%. We didn't anticipate the electricity. I don't think that it was calculated properly. I'll be very honest with you. You really need a full year of knowing what your savings was for the solar panels in order to find out what your cost would be. That it didn't come to fruition, so that's why there's a change, and we're putting it slightly back up there to $60,217. And for whatever reason, there was also an increase in the heat. I also had to make an adjustment for that as well. Other minor things for cleaning supplies, obviously, because we're going through cleaning supplies. And in general, this is what we're waiting for the town hall union salaries to occur. So that's why there's no increase at that point right now for those employees. Highway department. What I did here is, you'll notice the big changes are that it says there's a working supervisor, and it says in the 1920 budget it would be 0. What I did was I split that position out. It's still a working supervisor. That's the budgeted item for that particular employee. The rest of the salaries, you know, it's down 114. It's because I took out 66,000 there, and we are not going to go out to hire that employee that anticipated in the 1920 budget that we talked about so much this year. So that's why the difference is 114,624. We do anticipate a little bit more of the overtime. We don't think we'll get that much of a savings, but we just want to make sure in case there's anything happening weather-wise. We've been doing so far we've been doing very well this year, but we just anticipate that it might be something else happening. Sand, salt, and gravel, you notice in the description down below, where we're doing a little more support for the Little League fields. So we wanted to make sure that they got their dirt, and we were anticipating purchasing a little more for them. Motor fuel, a little bit more at this point, only because we have some other vehicles we're utilizing. Anything with vehicle expense wise. That's pretty much it for the highway. So it came down a little less than the previous year. Fire marshal, I do want to talk a little bit more about the fire marshal. Fire marshal is no proposed changes. The problem we're going to have here is that this employee is going to be retiring. We're going to be looking for someone to come in at that salary, and if you compare the towns around us, it doesn't happen. So we're working right now on a proposal where we can come up with some ordinances to help offset the cost for that. When the Board of Selectmen sit down and talk about that as in the time for the ordinances, we'll come back to the Board of Finance and explain the whole process. But we do anticipate at this point, up at least to half a year, that our fire marshal will be here, and that's where we stand at that for this department. His union salary doing contingency. Police department. I don't want people to be thinking, okay, they're just going to go with the exact same numbers as you see down the bottom of the page, because it's a $7 decrease. There are some offset numbers here, and I want to explain what they are. Most of it comes out of the police salaries. You notice that they were looking to hire 3 more staff, and of course, during the state process right now, the training headquarters are not operational. So they don't anticipate hiring them immediately. Therefore, they anticipate a few months of savings, and that's why there's a $20,611 in there. So it'll be an offset. I'm still negotiating with the chief and the captain for their salary, so that's also in contingency as well. Building inspectors, I need to explain this a little bit as to why there's a decrease. Okay, so what happened is there were 3 people in this position. One of the hires was going to take a test and did not pass the test for their certification. Under the process, they needed to still have a person with a certain license. So therefore, that's why there were 3 people. We still have this one person part-time who works 2 hours a week. They have to follow underneath that licensing. So once the test is completed for the final stage, he's already passed 1 test. He's got 1 more to go. Once that completes, the salaries are both part-time, and we're okay there. One is working a lot more hours part-time than the other, so I just wanted you to know that, but still we're anticipating savings on that line item. They just purchased a new vehicle, or a newer vehicle, so that we anticipate the savings in vehicle expenses. We had an issue, as you know, with the relocation fees, so we decided to be more cautious and bump it up. We already had a call on a couple more this year. We're trying to see if we can work out some things so we don't have to do it this year. But we know that there'll be some relocation fees coming up. So overall, it was a savings of $113 from last year. In our planning department, the only thing we're looking at is salary line increases when those unions finally come to an agreement. Other than that, it's going to be slightly. Economic development, here's one of the other changes. Under the economic developer position, I'm looking for someone who could be doing both. Economic development, mostly grant writing. You have 3 pages of grants which we could utilize. You want to take these grants for items that you want to purchase. It saves the town a tremendous amount of money. If you notice some of the capital, 5-year capital plan numbers, those are the things that I'm looking at as part of the savings. Other than that, it's pretty much offset numbers between marketing, supplies and expenses versus training and conferences. So that's what the changes are right there. It's a $55,000 at this point. And so it's a large investment down, but I think will be returned in income very quickly. Animal control, the only change in animal control at this point, other than the fact that we have somebody who is unions waiting for contingencies, that the part-time worker again falls underneath that new minimum hourly rate increase, and that's why there's an increase there. Recreation is a change. You'll notice a couple of big numbers there that changed. One is the department head. I'm looking to make that department a full-time position. I think we can do much more for our town with more recreation items, and that's why I want them to be working hard to bring more things and do more things with other towns. I want that person to be able to do more, so that's why I want them at full-time. There's two issues that you'll notice on the numbers, a big jump over the part-time salary. There are other positions which are actually underneath this. If I'm wrong, Kelly, you let me know, but it's basically, we're talking about taking on the part-time salary for maintenance person. We're talking about the driver for the Meals on Wheels. We're also talking about the issue where a lot of different part-time people are still falling underneath that issue where the salary line increases because of the minimum wage requirements again.
Yes.
That's why that number changes.
Yep, correct.
Yep. Same thing with the lifeguards, again, the minimum requirements for minimum wage increases. So the increase there is 20%, it's $68,000, only because of what I just mentioned. Next up, we have insurance and benefits. There are indications from those. Kelly keeps up with the numbers and what's anticipated from every one of those departments, and we feel that those are appropriate at this point. One line item you'll see changed is pension. We wanted to break this down a little bit more for you to have you understand. From the town side, we were looking at the pension from town unemployment for town employees at dropping it down to $450,000, and I'll get to the rest of that when we get to the other pages. We do anticipate a few of our staff retiring. That's why that bump in the number there. So that you'll see that the changes that are reflected here are based on our information, based on constant contact with our general insurance, working comp, and the anticipation is that we're not going to be utilizing that as much. So that's why there's be a savings there. The engineering firm, now we have a new MS4 that's required by the state. We have to follow those rules, and we anticipate there will be more projects coming up that require the specs to go through the engineering company. That's why the increase there to an increase of 17,000. I do want to talk about the computer now. I did send all of the board members a packet. I think it's appropriate to talk about that. And Kyle, I will unmute you in a minute so we can talk about that if that's okay, because I have to finish this. It will go into that. There is, again, the salary for that is also zero, again, in a union contract. Most of the other items pretty much stay the same. We moved off the adult education as was discussed with the Board of Education prior. You'll notice at the bottom of the page, and I'll start that because this is a two-pager. There's so many things on here. Moose Pond herbicide. We anticipate putting out $20,000 towards that. The whole program costs $32,012. The Moose Pond Association is putting in the rest of the money, so apply that towards the Moose Pond herbicide remediation. What's going on there is at the town resource, at the town beach, we don't want that to be overrun by the milfoil. They came up with a plan that to do so, but they needed some support. I wholeheartedly agree that this is something that we, as a resource for the town, we really need to keep up on. So we'd like to work with that as well. Holiday decorations, a small amount of decorations in a couple of the villages. They can't be lit because we don't have those nice poles that have the plug-ins. We have the other style poles. So, but what's some small decorations in the common areas would be nice. Synthetic ice rink is it's not. No, this is a purchase item that can be reused time and time again. If you think about it as a jigsaw puzzle that fits in and goes down within an hour or so, it can be taken up again and be stored away. We can use it again and again and again seasonally. So this is not a rental, this is a purchase, just so everybody knows. Next up there is the fireworks. And again, this is some of the things I'm thinking of doing only because especially in the fact that we're in a very difficult time where people are homebound and they're not getting out, and we know that there's going to be a turnaround and we know that things are going to happen. So we want to be able to have some things for them to do. We've talked with the Plainfield Business Association. I've been speaking with them today. I've been speaking with the VJ Parade coordinators, and I'll mention that in a second. But we would like to be able to do something as well in between those two like they have been in the past, and I think that's an appropriate thing. I'd like to buy some more flags for the town to put up on the flagpole around the town like they have been with the PBA. A video screen such as you would see the same thing over either at the high school or really the one over at the Worthing Firehouse, which is two-sided, and it tells you of the upcoming events that are happening, such as the referendums, such as different meetings that are going on, such as events that are happening around town. So I think that's important. That's a great location, central part of the town. Video cameras for all the town buildings for multiple reasons. For your staff to be safe, number one. For liability, in case anything happens, you have that so you can have it as a backup and support for your insurance. Hazardous waste day, we have not had a hazardous waste day since 2007. That's the full cost. I've reached out to some other towns and asked if they would mind going in with us. I'm waiting for them to give me a call back, but that's the full cost. If they do join in with us, obviously that cost minimizes and we can get some savings there. And the engineering department wanted a new vehicle. I said, well, let's try with it used. So they were very nice for that. Moving off the library, there was only a minimum increase for what they needed to do, so 8% there. Boards and commissions, you see that second line talking about the Board of Selectmen, that's really what it was for technical services. That's what we're using it for, so I put it in with everybody else's. That's why you see it like that.
Give it to me.
Next up, purchase services. So these are all the different services. The highlight that I wanted to bring up is you'll notice on NECOG transportation, before COVID-19 became prevalent, the state of Connecticut had the final say on having our NECOG bus transportation approved, and as soon as they did the executive orders, they had to hold off on actually doing the final vote. But the commissioner said that this is something that they'd like to see, so that's why I put that full amount in, so when we start up, it will go. The only other thing you'll notice is the increase is bulky waste has an increase, that's contractual, so I can't do much about that. You notice that there's a decrease over on the Council of Governments, the NECOG side of it, and it really, the only thing we're paying for other than the transportation is the basic assessment, which every town pays into, is $14,000. Our town is $14,414, and the other item that we do a paramedic service offset. It actually helps to save monies on anybody going. And Travis probably could fill in more better than I, but basically for services going up to Day Kimball, there's a set of savings for those residents who utilize that. Those are only two things we keep about. Everything else pretty much static, except the Department of Health did go up in their services, so their fees went up. And you'll see that in your packet. Town contributions, the only other thing I wanted to add in, and again, in a time like we are going through right now, we wanted to put that project in for $1,000. Their $1,000 goes 4.5, sometimes 5 times. They stretch out the dollar so much better than we can. So that's another request I wanted to put in. Capital expenses, you'll notice the only real big change here is you have the reval is basically part of the cooperative with NECOG, and we put in $32,542 for the years that we utilize it. And the other one that you'll see is $64,000 is for 2 police vehicles added in. You notice debt interest, there's one that's rolled off, that's the water sewer project for 0.197 mil, so that one is rolled off. And the principal, we're looking at the still the same ones that are on for principal, and there's obviously they're still going down, which is great. And we're talking about the fund balance. The only thing that you'll recognize in the fund balance is something we wanted to bring to your attention. The only 2 things here that are actually on the table are pension contributions, which we earmarked directly for school pension contributions of $800,000. And you'll read in the description that the pension contributions need to stay between a level of $1.2 and $1.5 million annually. The actuarial group tells us, hey, look, you've got to do this. So, by the way, the auditors will catch that as well. But if you look at that number and you say, if we don't keep up to a certain standard, we may have a problem with Moody's decreasing our rate. We do not want Moody's to decrease our rate. If that happens, we've talked about it. Ken and I have talked already about it. We're and as well as Tom, talking about what happens when we finally get one of those other bonds to drop off. What's our next plan of attack? If we want to plan part of the 5-year plan anyway, but we wanted to plan about what. So really, we want to make sure that our Moody's rating doesn't drop, so the next step can be, taken care of. So you'll see that there's only two things that are there. On the school side, the Board of Education has stepped up and they've talked exactly what you see here about the things that they were looking to pledge forward and make sure that they have in the budget, which gets us to 0 mil. At this point, you'll notice that if we want to do this properly, we'd like to have your input on it. I would put out the final version of it up onto the town website. I would also put it up onto, I'll print up some copies and leave them in certain areas for the residents to get. I'd also put the one pager. I know you have that in your booklet. There's a one pager out there. Let me just stop this for a minute. There we go. So the one pager basically is the one that if you notice it has the information on it. That's what's going to go into the turnpike buyer. So we'll do that. But we need to move forward on that. We need to move with your blessing. The questions and modifications we'd like to see, we'd like to hear about it, and then move forward so that we can bring it out there to the public. We like to give them a good 7 to 10 days at least for their input onto what's happening. And if they have questions, they can contact myself at kcunninghamselectmen@plainfieldct.org, or you can call the phone number here at the town hall. It's 860-230-3001. Tom said the same thing. If he has any questions, you can go through Tom. For the residents who are interested in putting comments in, questions, concerns, please, we're listening to what you have to say. So much appreciated. So if there's any questions at this point from members of the Board of Finance, I would turn it back to Tom.
All right, thanks, Kevin. So yeah, what I would like to do now is, again, I want to make sure every board member has the opportunity to speak, whether it just be comments or a couple questions to be directed for you or Kelly, or even our Board of Ed. So in starting that, I want to, again, go down the roster. So I want to turn it over to Ted Dumaine. Ted, you there?
I'm here.
All right, Ted, what are your thoughts, questions, concerns?
I guess basically my first question would be, do we actually have a say in whether this budget is good or not? Is the selectmen just going to put it in?
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
All right. Ted, the state statute allows the Board of Selectmen to take the budget as we see fit and put it forward. I have been in contact with both the Board of Education and Tom on the Board of Finance all the way along because I wanted their input. So that's why I just mentioned right now, if you have a comment or concern or an idea, I would definitely weigh that in, and I talk to. We'll keep talking. We'll communicate back and forth and see if we can get something to happen. Did you have a comment or concern, Ted? Anything you were worried about, or want to add, or want to delete?
I just want to know how much in the contingency is for raises. We got 50 grand in there.
We have 50 grand in there. We will. Kelly, I believe you're okay with that number.
Yes, yeah. It potentially maybe 40,000. It all depends on negotiations. Right now, we set aside about 40,000.
The anticipation for the contract negotiations at this point, Ted, are I'm coming to the table and asking people to consider a lower end for their contracts for the first year. So I think it will be well within our needs for the much lower than 40,000.
I'm going to yield my time because I think Gary might have a few questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ted. I'd like to move on next to Vice Chairman Travis Irons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to commend the first selectman on that visual presentation. I thought it was very well done. It not only spelled out very clearly the budget proposal for anybody who may be tuning in on the live stream, but also for the board members who aren't necessarily swimming in this process every day. I'd just like to say that I think the proposed budget that you put forward was very responsibly prepared. I applaud you for recognizing that the fire marshal's salary upon Paul's retirement will need to be current or brought up to be current with the times and the landscape of the area. And also the recognition that the rec director position needs to be full-time to best benefit the town. So all in all, I believe what you put forward is very commendable, and I appreciate your transparency, not only with us, but also the other taxpayers in town.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Travis. Moving on to Don Cavella. Don, you there?
Yeah,
All right.
we have 17% increase in workers' comp costs. Did we have a few more accidents this year requiring that? Kind of
Well,
an increase?
Well, the increase, what was budgeted for the fiscal year 2020 versus what was allocated to the town, it changed. So in the current year budget, we're gonna be short. Right now, we're short in workers' comp line item due to the fact the allocation to the school and the town, it changed. So right now, we are short about 41,000 in workers' comp. So next year's budget, I want to make sure we're not going to be. So that's due to the increase.
On the electric panels we have on the roof, which buildings are working now? Is any of them in, online?
Online.
Huh?
Which ones are online, Kevin?
I think that we have all of the ones that were up on the roofs. There's also an array over at the Water Pollution Control Authority. Those are all online at this point. And again, we don't really have enough of a sample to say what we're doing with savings. At this point, I don't see the numbers that we anticipated coming in at this point. That's why we did make an adjustment to do a small increase.
Okay. And the distress enterprise zone, that came from where?
Morgan Trucking. It was from Morgan Trucking. We can now apply for it, so we should be getting some revenue back from the state.
Okay. The moment I think I'm all set.
Okay, thank you, Don. Kim Medlin is, of course, absent from the meeting, but Kevin, one of the opportunities I did put forth to Kim is that if she could maybe in the next couple of days send any comments or questions she may have had that she hasn't gotten to you thus far already in writing to you, then you can at least review that with the Board of Selectmen and take her input into consideration, just like the rest of us.
That's great. I appreciate that.
All right. Gary, floor is yours.
No, I really am. You all got my numbers. I don't have too much to say. The only thing is that when I did the proposed town budget, I did that like a month before the selectmen and the department heads even did theirs. So, and I took that off for the last 4 or 5 years of budgets when I did mine.
Mhm.
So, and that's for you to all mull over. Plus, the proposed cuts in the Board of Ed and all that. So, but I'm pretty well set for now.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Keith, you there?
Keith, you're on mute.
Yeah, you're on mute.
I still don't know how to use technology, and I'm 24 years old. One of the main benefits of having my last name at the end of the alphabet is having most of your questions or comments answered or asked already. No, I don't have any questions, but I do think this is a very responsible budget. Thanks, Kevin, for putting it together. And like Travis said, for the transparency, it's a very weird time, and I appreciate that you can kind of put it all right in front of us. So I appreciate it. I have no further comments or questions.
Okay, thank you, Keith. Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first, I want to echo what Travis and Keith just said, and I'm sure everybody else is kind of thinking too. Thank you for putting together such a cohesive presentation of the budget. A lot of good information there for anybody following along. I hope that slideshow in itself might be available as well, fully annotated with the notes for the general public. I do appreciate the fact that it is a 0 mil increase. I think that is always important to strive for, not just for ideological reasons among some of us, but also due to the fact that traditional democratic traditions are being suspended seemingly at this time. So without the public's input, I think this was the very least that could be done, is making sure that the budget was going to be as flat as possible given the lack of traditional input in terms of referendum. All of that being said, there are just a couple of questions I have here, trying not to play the stormy little rain cloud too much. But my first and largest concern here is that we're trying to forecast the budget here, and I obviously respect the limitations of our forecasting abilities. The economy has been shut down for about a month now, and I have to think that we are going to see this echo through in terms of tax collection. I don't think it's a matter of if it happens. It certainly seems inevitable with so much of the economy seems shut down. And I guess I'm just curious as to where, Kevin, where you may stand on this, and Kelly, what your thoughts may be on what we may be anticipating looking forward as slowly but surely, I'm sure the economy will come back on track, but this is definitely going to be a very large impact. I know we've asked the Board of Ed numerous times when they present a budget to have a contingency plan for cuts. And I would like to know if, given the current economic condition, the town side of the equation is also considering the same thing. Perhaps maybe the scale of what we would anticipate in a drop in the collection rate. So that's my first question, if you want to just speak to that quickly.
I will. Actually, we have on with us Karen. Karen, you're now unmuted. So we did talk about, if you're able to talk, I mean, your screen was having a problem the other night. If not, if you want to do is chat and I can relay the information. But Karen, are you there?
On watch?
She's asking, same problem as yesterday.
She's on chat.
Her microphone's not working.
Yeah. So the question was asked, and I will try to answer it as best I can and have Karen verify if you want to type in the chat. But basically, we talked about a deferment process, which is allowed by the state of Connecticut. So we are allowed to do a deferment for 3 months. So if it's 90 days, people who are just back into the swing of things, getting jobs again, through the whole process. So that's why we did that via vote the other night.
What is our collection rate as of right now for this year?
97%. And the only thing about the 90-day deferred collection period, only thing I would recommend, like for the town and the Board of Ed, to try to be conservative in their expending for July, August, and September.
All right. So yeah, I do think that whatever, if there is a thought, or if we start to see any drop in receipts around that time frame, whether due to the deferment plan or any other cause, obviously the economy being on hold until further notice for the most part, I would recommend that. I think it would benefit the Board of Finance and the town at least to see at some point down the road whether it'd be a 1% reduction plan or something appropriate just to have in the back pocket in case things don't improve as quickly as I think we'd all like to. But who knows? Maybe all the stimulus checks will go towards those payments. You never know.
Wow.
Everybody will feel generous.
Good thought.
So my other 2 questions here were along the lines of the pool. I saw that looks like a renewed focus into the rec department and everything. And one of the conversations that was had when we were approving the funding to repair the pool was whether we were going to be housing this within a certain department and tasking, full management, promotion of the pool, and everything that could go with trying to make sure that everybody we could possibly reach that would have interest in this to make it a great revenue source could be reached. Is this something that's reasonably an expectation within this budget? Is that new full-time rec director going to be tasked with that responsibility? If I am
1,000%. And number one, just to give you some background on that, we had already planned for a 100-year celebration for the building, and coinciding with that would have been the grand reopening of the pool. We had everything all lined up. I still have the packet over here ready to go. We had costume, we had invitations ready to roll out there. Just from the time that we reopened temporarily, when we fixed it and reopened it, we had an increase rate which was very drastic. The increase of people utilizing the pool jumped from about 15 to 40. And that's without actually pushing hard to promote this as it should be. So with a full-time rec director out there pushing it, promoting it, and more activities going on, while I did have a backup plan, the backup plan, if you notice in your packet, brings the number up, I think it's like 123, the payoff for that department. I think we'll be very comfortable by being able to get the revenues up to that line. So I think we're okay with that. But that's my backup plan to it. I know it will be, it's on point.
Will the revenue cover the expenses?
If we do this right, absolutely, Ted.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I guess a final question that's just coming to mind. I mean, obviously the economic situation right now is paramount when I'm looking at this budget, in my 2 cents. The other aspect, because we do seem to be really pushing big towards, making the town look attractive in terms of economic development, getting people interested in, either having activities in town, businesses in town. How much, as far as the anticipated revenues that we could see from that, is there any meaningful concern about like some of the social distancing measures that, even though they're sort of new right now, I would have to think are probably in position to be persistent through the rest of the year and probably going forward? My concern is that we could have some of the expenses, and I definitely respect the optimism. I think you definitely need that when piecing together some of these budgets. I'm just curious if the scale of which we're looking at the investment is going to match the social and economic climate right now. I know, Plainfield isn't experiencing this nearly as bad as other parts of Connecticut are, closer to New York, but it's a one-size-fits-all approach from our governor and the Department of Health and everything right now. So given that we kind of have to move in lockstep with everybody else, is there any possible reason to maybe pull back any of these dollars that we're going to expend, or what's the thought process connected to that right now?
Okay, the issues that we have are, if we're not putting out a full-time rec person, if we're not purchasing the skate rink, then that means we're not prepared. So when we do gradually come back, we're not prepared and ready to go. So that's why I wanted to at least have it on the a table for a discussion and bring it forward, because you are right. If you think about the world we live in right now, I don't think that anybody can say that this isn't or hasn't going to change, won't change what we are going to do in the future. People who wear the masks, people will be more cautious, that they're going to have some concerns about going out. Gradually, those things will open up. We know that there's an end in sight. It's a matter of when. So I am cautious about putting things back together and doing it in a certain step, but I know that we anticipate things opening up again, and I want to be prepared for it. That's why the budget's like it is.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Matt. Couple things, Kevin, I wanted to throw at you as well. How is this affecting, of course, our plan was, you remember when you first took office, we had a meeting about going out to bond for the schools for HVAC. So we had talked instead about a timeline of basically being like a year out. We talked about this spring trying to get information out. Of course, the public, that didn't happen. But I'm saying now, kind of looking down the road, are we still looking at some point in the next fiscal year to revisit that? And if so, has there been any thought given to like when we would want to be doing that?
Well, I think that discussion should always continue. We need to be having that line of communication open with the Board of Education, with the town, with the Board of Finance. And what we've done so far, I think, was a good first step. I think that we get advisement from our financial director, Kelly, say where are we along the lines of actually having something roll off, and gives us that 5-year capital plan to prepare for the next step. And I think we did a good job of recognizing what the next need is, and for those in the public, we're talking about what the next needs are for our capital improvements, we talked about how the HVAC systems over a couple of schools are so antiquated that, what do you think, Ken? Maybe they're probably about 30 years outdated. They should have been replaced 30 years ago. And so we're looking at that right now, and we want to continue looking at the different things that are happening in town. When we finally get back together, I really wanted to have that ad hoc building committee go around and make sure, like Ken is doing with the 2025s, do that the same sort of process with all the other town buildings to find out what the longevity is for each building, and plan accordingly to how we'd be able to plan out and eventually replace and rotate those bonds as we go through. So
Yeah.
The discussion started. I think it should continue, and I think we should again look at what we need to do next.
Yeah, the other one that I think we should make mention of again in the future is I remember talking to you and Kelly about WPCA with their bond, and that they have some huge upgrades, some huge expenses that are going to be coming up down the pipe. And something that I think a lot of the general public, a lot of the taxpayers in town don't realize that, because it's one of those kind of like, nobody really talks a heck a lot about WPCA or knows a lot about it, but I think that's an important one to acknowledge too, and note that, that's one of those important services that can't go on forever, and eventually needs major upgrades, but they're very costly.
Yep. Well, while we're on that subject, if you don't mind, just to go back and broach the subject, you notice in the 5-year capital, I'm sorry, not 5-year capital, but the debt and interest, there's a bond on there for Water Pollution Control Authority, at least one of them. And that one it piqued my curiosity, because I'm wondering how that ever got onto the town side of a budget when we have a Water Pollution Control Authority that has entirely their own budget.
Right.
So the good and the bad about that is, for the people who have that type of a service, they didn't have that bond put into their rates. Instead, every resident in the town of Plainfield pays for that.
The residents were paying for half of it, because the other half was coming from sewer assessment account.
Right. So we need to talk about how we can adjust that in the future.
Yeah.
The problem is, when you do that and you put the whole bond back into their rates are going to go up, and they're going to go up. They're going to go up anyway now because of all the upgrades that need to be done. So while it's difficult to swallow the fact that your rate may go way up, the idea is that you haven't been paying for that portion of it so far anyway. It's really big. It came upon the entire town to pay for that part of the bond. So yeah, we do have to talk about that. That's the next step of discussion of putting a budget together, and we're working on that right now.
Yeah. And then kind of revisiting what Matt was saying earlier, now I've talked to Ken about this a great deal too, that again, if certain things weren't to come through, is there a contingency plan? I know Ken has told me on many occasions, yes, it's one of those worst case scenarios. It's one of those things we don't want to visit unless we absolutely have to. But, what I've talked about a lot with Ken on the education side, looking at the town side, my guess would be that if things really got tight and you had to cut what you have presented here in front of us as a proposal, my guess is it would be going towards things such as firework and synthetic ice rink, which, I understand the importance of it, and I'm not against those entirely, but on the same point, looking at things that still, would have to be put on the back burner if things don't turn out well with the budget in the coming year. So just kind of throwing that out there of, is that something that you've tried to put together, some type of contingency plan like that? Of if, again, things didn't work out, what would be the next to go?
I do have a contingency plan for items that we would not purchase or not put money towards. So I am prepared.
Yeah, okay. Another clarification is when it comes to the pool salaries. So I know that it's an area that we've talked about quite a bit at Board of Finance meetings and that needs to be improved upon. Is that another one that had to go up because it's in relation to, of course, having the hourly rate, having to keep up with that?
With the lifeguards, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. And then clarification, as I know I've talked to some residents, when it comes to supervisor for highway and for buildings and grounds, there is no supervisor for buildings and grounds, correct?
We do not have a supervisor at this time for buildings and grounds.
Okay.
Can I cut in there for a minute?
Yeah.
Does that guy work without a supervisor?
I assign some things to him during the day, so I give guidance to him. I want him to be able to take off on that idea so he does assign other people work to do as well. So I would consider that to be a position where we're transitioning it into a working supervisor so that he has more working skills to be able to go forward.
Okay. And those are just some of the specific ones I had. I mean, overall, Kevin, as the member said, I mean, I do certainly appreciate your process that we've been going here since this was not originally planned. You know, we were hoping to stay to the budget calendar as we always do, but under the circumstances, you know, I know you've done your best as far as putting this budget together and being transparent with the board. And so I appreciate, you know, all our conversations, your conversations with all the individual Board of Finance members, and the presentation certainly tonight was helpful just to see, I mean, you know, what we're going to try to, you know, do under the circumstances. But knowing that, again, I'm not looking forward to next fiscal year because we're going to start to see kind of the aftermath of this virus when planning ahead for next fiscal year, and we'll hit that, you know, when we get to it. But in the meantime, just trying to be frugal, trying to be very conservative with our spending, and so knowing, again, like I said, having a contingency plan. You know, if things end up not in, especially with the state, with their financial situation, I'm sure we'll be having many more conversations about that. So, again, I appreciate your time, Art, and Kathy, the Board of Selectmen, as well as all the time I've spent talking with Ken and Christy, the Board of Ed side. And so looking ahead, your plan would be within the next week to get this posted in the Turnpike Buyer for those who cannot view it online, correct?
Right, but here's my question I have to you and the members of the Board of Finance.
Yeah.
If I'm going to be putting that out to the public, I guess at this point, what would your pleasure be? Is it that you're looking to keep it as it currently is constructed? Because that's what we'd be putting out to the public. Then after, let's hypothetical, you and I get replies back from the public saying, I don't like this, or I'd like more of that. Do we sit down again and have another adjustment and another 2-week window? Because sooner or later, you're going to have to come up with a budget to say, this is what the Board of Finance / Board of Selectmen have voted on as stated by the executive orders, allowing us to do. And I'd say that because I do want to have your involvement and modifications if need be. So that's how I would like to be able to present it, but the question is, I didn't hear anything at this time where you wanted to make any changes. Did you want me to publish it as is? I guess that would require you to talk about it, your board and vote on it.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, I remember when we talked about this agenda, you know, beforehand, the plan was to have a discussion and to give our feedback to you and the Board of Selectmen, who in the end, you know, are going to be having your special meeting at some point in the next 2 weeks, I would assume.
Right.
To then make the decision on the budget and set the mill rate. But because it's not in the usual process of the Board of Finance voting to send it to referendum or to town meeting and then having a special meeting immediately after to set the mill rate, because we're not following that process, I, of course, didn't put it on as an item to vote. I can't change that.
I understand.
So what I would do is, I mean, I certainly respect that question. I would, you know, be willing to open the floor again to the board members to give their thoughts on that specific question. As far as how they would like to proceed in the future, we could have another special meeting like this, where I could, of course, word it to do an official vote. But again, I kind of looked at it as with the governor's order. I mean, does it make sense? Is that redundant? Because at the end of the day, it's going to be your, you know, vote that's really passing it at the selectmen's meeting. So
I'll make a suggestion. Why don't we, if you don't mind, why don't we publish as is? I didn't hear anything that would be something we want to change at this point. Nothing that was outstanding that you wanted to change, unless I didn't hear it correctly. But if we publish it as is, give it until our usual, which is what, May 4th? That would have been our regular time to actually have a town meeting. Have a joint meeting between all 3 boards. That, if there's any changes to be made, make the changes. If not, set the mill rate and vote. Because technically, just so the public understands, by way of the town charter, if we had a 0 mill increase anyway, there is no vote. It's basically the Board of Finance would set the mill rate, and that's it. So I'm trying to follow along the same lines of the charter anyway. I think the appropriate way to do it, where we publish what we have and take suggestions and comments bring it to that next meeting to then set at May 4th time.
Okay, but with that next meeting, would that technically be a Board of Selectmen's meeting?
A joint between all three.
Okay, and then who would be making the official vote though? Would it be Board of Selectmen or Board of Finance?
Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, okay. I just want to make that clear. Personally, yeah, I would be fine with that option. But I'd like to open the floor just for one final, any comments from the board members as far as how they feel on it.
This is Travis.
Yeah.
I just kind of echo what Kevin said. I feel as though the period of public comment is vital, especially given the current climate and the limitations that are placed on everybody related to the budget process. And I think at that joint meeting, based on that public comment, it may be appropriate for the Board of Finance to at least vote to make an endorsement of the budget in support of the Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
I'll echo what Travis just said. I think it's probably quietly really important, especially with the perpetual state of emergency, that we maintain as much a sense of normalcy in regards to the budget process, and where we can at all respect the public's input on this and entertain other ideas and either increases, cuts, whatever the public's opinion may be, they should at least be heard in as public of a manner as possible given the situation. And yeah, I think it would be best to make sure that we've made the maximum allowable opportunity for public input, and then for the Board of Finance to operate as close to its traditional role in this process, even if that means just by an endorsement motion, whether that pass or fail. I mean, it's you'll at least know where the other elected members of the town stand.
Yeah. And Kevin, just out of curiosity, when it comes to the Board of Selectmen voting on it, do you technically have to do 3 separate votes because of the 3 separate budgets, as we would usually ask the question to the town if they were voting on it, or would you just make one vote on all 3?
Well, we have the 5-year capital ready to go. You've all had a copy of that, and unless again we'll take the input and comments from that as well. We might as well keep as close to what we normally do for a vote anyway. So I believe all 3 would be appropriate.
We have 3, yeah, okay.
And while we're at it, Ken, you have a problem with that, or are you okay with that, or is it any input you wanted to put there, Ken?
It's actually Christie, because it'll be a board.
Yeah. Christy, are you there?
Yes, I am. Sorry. Bedtime in my house, as you can see, is crazy. So I've had to go in and out of mute a couple times. That is fine. I can make sure that we notify our board members for the joint meeting, and that, we'll do what we can to support.
Okay.
Is the Board of Education in the same position as the Selectmen, that they can endorse their own budget and need not be passed by anybody else?
No, this actually, through the state statute, through the executive order that was passed by the governor, it's really unbelievably, it's on the Board of Selectmen. But throughout the entire process, trying to involve the other boards so that we all are on the same page. That's why I wanted to have a joint meeting, so we can get some continuity, some endorsement would be fantastic, and we move forward with whatever the public has for input. To make any adjustments at that time would be fine.
So you'll be bringing forth any comments from the general public, so the Board of Finance and anybody else attending will be able to see it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Just a point of clarification, is there any possible way we can think of to make sure that we don't have a situation where people are claiming to have sent in feedback that doesn't get heard, if we're gonna go that route?
Every email that I get, every phone call that I get, I document, so I can do that.
Yeah, and one of the things we'll do too is prior, within a day or 2 leading up to that joint meeting, I talk to Kevin on a pretty regular basis anyway, but him and I can certainly touch base, and I'll let him know, kind of what I've gotten thus far of any questions or inquiries, what he has leading up to that. And we could essentially formulate a list of this is thus far what we got out of public input and make sure it's going over at that meeting.
Just to make sure that we get that type of a transparent, uniform access to the information. I'm gonna have, if Kyle, I just think I might have just unmuted you. Unmuted, maybe. Anyways, unmute. There we go. Kyle, if what we'll do is we'll set up an email account that only Tom and I can see jointly. That way, whenever an email comes in, we both have access to see it. Oh, and Christie as well. So the three of us will be able to see what's going on, and that way we can bring it forward to you if you like.
He's still on mute.
Kyle's on mute.
Yeah. All right. Come on, Kyle.
There he goes.
Is that okay, Kyle, to have the Christie and myself on a email access for a special email? Kyle? Guess not. I got him on unmute. He's unmuted. Must be his computer. Computer guy has a problem with the computer.
So,
That's all right.
so yeah, with that said, I mean, I'm comfortable with that. Are there other members who have any thoughts on how to proceed?
I'm all set.
I think it's the best way we can do it before the rest. We've done that tonight.
Yep.
I think it's a good way to go.
Is there any way the general public can view what we just did?
Absolutely. What this is under Zoom, it's auto recorded.
Okay.
So if it as long as it recorded, we're good to go, and I can put it back up there for everybody to see. And if we do have our recording secretary Doty's here to do as much as we can with it. But yeah, I can definitely see if as long as it's recorded, we'll put it up.
Because, yeah, Kevin, that was a question that came up. So even though we record it and people can go view it, minutes will still get published as usual, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay. Because somebody was asking about the minute, trying to access the minutes from the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen Zoom meeting. And maybe they just weren't able to locate them, but I just wanted that to be clear. Like, yeah, you can go to those minutes too, even though they were Zoom meetings.
Right. Every transcriber will still continue transcribing the meetings for us. They'll still go up onto the town website, and we do have access. The meeting I had for the Board of Selectmen the other night definitely is up on a link. I'm just trying to figure out how to put it up onto the town website.
Okay. If there are no other questions or comments from members, I have already hit on some of the subjects that I had gotten for citizen participation. I had no other specific questions from any specific individuals. It was just some of those general discussions we had, some of the topics that some citizens have reached out to me about, but I have
Tom,
nothing
I
else.
have one additional question, just I'm pretty sure it can be answered quickly. Regarding the school pension contribution,
Yeah.
how we're handling that differently. I'm just curious as to how we arrived at that calculation and what we're doing differently now that's led us to set up the budget this way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we do get the information from the actuarials of what we should be putting in on an annual basis. So that's how that 1.2 million came into be.
Ken, did you have anything you wanted to add? 'Cause I know you and I had talked about that before when it comes to pension.
I just think that it's gonna take us 2 years to make this transition. Like, we just need to start increasing the board's contribution to pension because of the weight of the number of people who go into the pension. And the fact is, it's just been, a little bit convoluted over the years. There was some money on the town side that came from the school side. But I think that now what we're doing is we're all aware of it, and we just need to start figuring out how to reseed it. It's money that has to come back. This is just not the year right now to fix the whole problem. And we seem to be in a good place at this point. So we know the problem and we have to work on it.
All right, thank you.
Now that we have Kyle, you here? Came back. Okay. Came back. You tried to log back in again, but I don't think your microphone's working still.
Okay.
I will talk to him about that, see if we can get the joint email account that we can all look at.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions or comments from the board members?
Just want to say thank you to everybody again. Board of Ed, Board of Selectmen, everybody involved with the process. I know this could not have been easy. Maintaining your social distance and trying to get as much of this done via remote measures, which for a lot of us are either new to us in practice or just a challenge to get more than 2 or 3 people together. So again, big thank you for all of your efforts so far, and let's hope that it all is smooth sailing from here.
Thank you, Matt. Anything else?
So would we anticipate our next meeting being a special meeting for May 4th?
Okay, May 4th?
I had canceled out our Board of Selectmen's next meeting for the 27th, because we really didn't have anything on our agenda.
Mm-hmm.
We could definitely on May 4th and gather data in between.
Right, and the other thing is before then, again, the public would be able to view the summary and the Turnpike buyer, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'll have it published, I'll put it in tomorrow, so next week it'll be in.
Okay. All right, if there is nothing else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Can I ask just a question? Was the
Yeah.
set aside, Mr. Cunningham, was the set aside going to be discussed tonight, or is that at a future time?
We can do that at a future time.
Okay, I'm not worried about it then. I'm not
Okay.
worried at all. I just didn't know, I didn't remember if it was on the agenda or not. Okay. No problem.
What time on the 4th of May? Is that gonna be 7 p.m.?
We usually start that meeting for the town meeting at 7 p.m.
7, yep. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Who was that?
That was Matt Radan.
Ted Domain, second.
Very, very good. All those in favor of adjourning, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? We're adjourned at 8:27. Thank you, everybody, for your participation.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.
Good night.
good night.
Right.
Good night, John Boy.
Good night, Uncle Ted.
You the man.
I'm going to end meeting now.
All right.